point now where we're unpacking governance, as you said, and creating not just that left-hand column that has led us to thinking about management effectiveness, but that right-hand column that's about the quality and the principles behind governance. So there's some really exciting evolution of thinking, and it came through in that presentation. It's my pleasure now to invite Julia Miranda to speak. Julia is well known to many here. She is the director of the National Parks Agency of Colombia, where she is the PAWPA focal point. But she's also the regional vice chair for South America in the WCPA, and also is active with a technical cooperation network called Red Parques, where she's been working to support countries in the region in implementing all elements of PAWPA, including those elements that haven't advanced as quickly and as well related to governance, equity, and benefit sharing. And finally, as many of you know, she's the 2012 winner of the Packard Award. So, pleasure to have you here, Julia.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to present the Colombian case in this important event. Second, my excuses for my lack of English. So if I miss some words, please help me. I hope I can make it. Bueno, acá lo lograr. Okay. This is our country. We have a system that has 52 years old, and the national institution that administrates the national parks also has the duty of the coordination of the national system of protected areas, which means the national parks, the regional protected areas, and the private sector, the private protected areas. It's 12 million hectares, more than 12 million hectares of the national territory. And to start with an important point about this issue, the environmental authority is not delegated. We can start with that to make it clear since the beginning, even though it's a really interesting type of governance what we have. So what is our legal and institutional framework? First of all, very important, the labor, how was it? The International Labor Convention that was signed by Colombia. Second important issue in history, our constitution, which recognized that Colombia is a multicultural and diverse country, recognizes the owners of the land of the indigenous in their resguardos, and the constitution recognized them as public authorities in their land. So it is a very important issue that deals with us, because from these 56 national parks, 20 of them are overlapped with these resguardos. And these authorities, we have to work with them by law. It's a mandate of the Constitution of Colombia. In 1993, it was the creation of the National Environmental System, where was created the Ministry of Environment and the Park Agency of Colombia. Then, in 1995, the ratification of the Convention on Biological Diversity with Artículo 8, J, and 15, which is a mandate also for us, because it is a law for us right now in our country. And in 2001, the approval of this policy that is, the name is Social Participation in the Parks Policy. Participación social en la conservación. And we of course have many other law laws and decrees, but for this issue, these are the main points in history. From our whole strategic plan, I chose these two main issues that are in our institutional strategic plan. We have strategic lines, programs, sub-programs in all the issues that we have to manage in our parks. And this one first, towards a comprehensive protected area system. Comprehensive means all the actors have to be involved in the administration, in the work, in our national parks. This program, improving the governance conditions of the actors of the system, is developed by activities, of course, indicators, budget, all from that. This is just to show you how it is absolutely clear that in our strategic plan, the governance-related actions and strategic lines. The sub-program says that we have to arrange special management strategies with ethnic groups, which allows articulation of different territory approaches. And the other one is the management effectiveness in the protected area system. We have is a mandate that we have to reduce pressures that affect the natural and cultural dynamics, and the sub-programs that to promote institutional processes in the areas of influence of the national protected area system, and regulate and control the use and exploitation of natural resources in the areas. Now, how we do this? What is down there is something that is transversal to the whole activity, which is government of the communities, culture of them, their territory, and the management of the park. So we have to work not only for the park, but to strengthen the culture, to give strength also of the way of government, the communities, to save their territory for their well-being, and to do the management with them. If it is not clear, please, you just tell me again. The actors, the many actors. Of course, we are speaking about the government doing the duty for conservation, but not alone at all. With public, private, national and international institutions, and I mean national, regional, local, and of course the authorities of the indigenous communities and the black communities in our country. Residents and users of areas and their surrounding areas, we are speaking about the buffer zones, we work with them. And when I speak about residents, is the indigenous communities that have the right to be in the park and use the natural resources for their living, the traditional way of living. Of course, the academic community and other, I mixed them. Okay, the peasants up and the ethnic groups down, which I just mentioned. The peasants is a case that of course we have in our country, but they are not legally inside the parks. So we have to deal with them, how to manage the impact. Of course, they are actors for us because we have to work with them to stop and to manage the impacts in the national parks. Because the only one Colombian that can legally use the resources in the parks are the indigenous people in their territories. We do agreements with the black community, but it's a different case, as you will see in the next. So these are the mechanisms. for conservation. As I said, our Constitution recognizes the public authority to indigenous groups and the ownership of their territories. So we have to work by mandate of law with all the authorities that are overlapped in our national parks. It is not an issue that happens from one day to the other. We really spend the time that we need in conversation with them, many meetings, many reunions, and we take the time that they need and that we need to make the agreements, to sign the agreements. Whatever is needed, we invest in time and resources and dedication to finally get the agreements that we had signed, 8 agreements until now, and one more we are almost there. We call it a special management regime, what we agree in those agreements. We agree how to manage the park, how we zone the park, which ones are the objectives of conservation in that park, where will they use the land to grow their crops, which fauna species are they going to use for their food or their needs? What do they need in terms of vegetal resource or whatever they need for their living? So that's with how much? 3? Okay. That's about the special management regime. So we agree and we together take the decisions of the management plan, and we apply the budget that we have to that decisions that we agree. In the case of the African Colombian communities, is different. They don't have the recognition of the same recognition in the Constitution, but anyway, we have to recognize that they are in the parks, they are using the resources. So what we don't build together the management plan as we do with the indigenous communities, but we work a lot with them and do agreements of use of the resources, mainly in the buffer zones, sometimes very few inside the national parks. So we use 2 mechanisms. The management plan that recognizes the local communities' traditions and traditional practices in using the natural resources, and the agreements for you of use these resources for our management plan to manage really and monitoring and follow what is going on in these parks. It is not only about conservation, but it is about preservation, restoration, and sustainable use. We have been going beyond only conservation. We have, as you see, highly represented communities in our whole system. So we have a strategy that it is not only about conservation, but very important restoration with them and sustainable use. And here is a list of some of our national parks with some numbers about the work that we have done in restoration. We do lots of restoration with the peasants, which are the persons that are not allowed to do many activities inside the national parks. We do restoration with the indigenous communities also, and it is a big issue in the management of the park and in the activities that we do with all these actors in the parks. As conclusions, and it doesn't say conclusions there, but it should say there. We have in Colombia legal instruments that have strengthened our governance and our tools to work in the national parks. The social participation policies is a very important opportunity for us to transcend, as I said, the vision of just conservation towards the inclusion of human groups as part of the institutional strategy. The mechanisms used have facilitated the protected areas managed by the state and comply the conservation objectives and international standards and the goals that we have as nation. And we are willing, of course, to improve the mechanisms that to work every day better and better with the communities, because it's the only way that we have to have real results in our national parks. The issue that they are recognized political authorities, and we are environmental authorities, make us really work together to achieve the main goals, which is not only to preserve the national parks, but also to improve their standards of life. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah. Okay. Julia, thank you so much for that presentation, and I think it really illustrates the complexity of the context in Colombia and how you are, with a great deal of investment of time, energy, and dedication, how you're addressing that complexity. And it's great to see that your legal instruments are complemented with this social participation policy. It's really exciting to see that. So, our next speaker is Pedro, who will be introduced by Bertie.
Okay. Pedro Solano is the Executive Director of the Peruvian Society for Environmental Law, which is one of Peru's leading conservation organizations. He is also a member of both the World Commission on Protected Areas and the Commission on Environmental Law. He has long experience in designing and drafting national protected areas law, author of several books and articles on the issue, and committed to promote and implement private and community-based conservation areas in Latin America since 2004. When we launched the Initiative for Private and Community-Based Conservation, this is not written well. We helped launch the Initiative for Private and Community-Based Conservation in Peru, is that correct? Yeah. Something written wrong here. A platform that today has contributed to the development of more than 150 areas in Peru. He has also helped draft the Mesoamerican Policy for Private Protected Land and a document formally approved by all environmental ministries of the Mesoamerican region. Pedro, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Jordi. Well, as you see, I put slash there because everybody's talking about the private protected areas and is highlighting the aspect of these areas being private owned. But I like very much more to talk about the voluntary aspects of these areas, which I think we should highlight it more because that's what qualifies of these areas. You have a title holder, an owner in most of the cases that decided by his own will to dedicate his area to conservation. So I think that's the value. How can I? Yeah, I see. Okay, and this voluntary conservation by individual owners has a long standing in Latin America. It's a long history. This year, for example, Monteverde Reserve in Costa Rica celebrates 40 years. 40 years that they decided, by their own will, to create a private reserve. And in those years, there was no legislation or framework or a concept of a private protected area. It was just the decision of the owners. So at the start of this movement or will from different owners through the continent, I will talk to you mostly about Latin America this evening. There was no regulations, there was only the will. But the story started to change like since 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we in Latin America started to have some protected areas framework that enable private owners to be part of the systems, or it started the creation of networks, which has been very popular in Latin America for these types of protected areas. So, talking about statistics is very, very difficult because there are a lot of different stages in this thing of private protected areas. But you know, each 2 years we have a Congress, an Inter-American Congress, and we always are tempted to do the statistics between all the countries. No, in our last Congress in 2008, it was said that we had like 3,000 formal, it is said, registered